Mr. Chairman, Ashcraft here.
Okay, yes.
For some reason, my camera is not working, but the audio is, so I apologize.
I can hear you very well. Yeah.
Okay.
Chairman, we are ready to go. Thank you.
At this time, we'll call to order the Board of County Commissioners special meeting for Tuesday, February the 8th. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Fast.
Aye.
Commissioner Myers.
Myers, aye.
Commissioner O'Hara.
Here.
Commissioner Hanslick.
Hanslick here.
Commissioner Ashcraft.
Present.
Commissioner Allenbrand.
Allenbrand, aye.
And Chairman Eilert.
Eilert here. All seven are present. We do have a quorum. Would you join with me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This special meeting was authorized by the Board of County Commissioners at our last Thursday's meeting, and there is no regular agenda. We will receive management reports, COVID update, as well as an update on our own organization. And the reason for the meeting today is to evaluate that information and make a decision as to whether or not to go back to a hybrid virtual meeting. So at this point in time, I will turn the meeting over to the county manager.
Chairman and Commissioners, good afternoon. As the chairman said, we are going to do a very high-level summary of the latest community cases and outlook, and then I will spend a few slides on the workforce numbers, and then talk about continued mitigation efforts, and see what questions you have for us today. So with that, Chairman, I'll go ahead and there's the agenda on your screen, and I'll go ahead and go into just a reminder, and Chairman said this, but I'll repeat that starting on January 13th, you started going virtually again, and that resolution that you adopted that day was to go through February 17th unless altered before. And so as a reminder, the resolution also included boards and appointed boards and commissions. So I just, while the cases are still high, the trend has been going down. And so at last Thursday's meeting, as Chairman said, then you set the special meeting to discuss where we're at in the overall picture. So I just want to take a few minutes to say thank you for the board for taking that quick action during this high level of spread in the community and our workforce. I think it was a tool that helped us be able to provide almost all of our services in the continuity of government. So I just want to pause and say thank you as we're looking at another up and down in this pandemic. The numbers are looking more favorable. And so I just want to take a moment to say thank you for your quick action for those weeks. And we'll give you an update where we are now. And we just need to keep the mitigation efforts going, but we do think it's time for some changes. So Dr. Ariola is up next to give a very high level. I'm sorry, we skipped some slides. I guess I was on the next one. I didn't cue the person, but I covered this one. The next one is Dr. Ariola, And he has a more detailed report planned for Thursday, but just to give a high level view of the community where we're at, he's next, and then I will give some workforce numbers. Dr. Ariola?
Thank you, Penny. Good afternoon, Chairman. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Dr. Areola with the Department of Health and Environment. And I'm just going to talk about our metrics that we use. I think if you take me to the next slide, you will see that the two metrics that we typically use, incidence rate and positivity rate, are trending down. Next slide, please. And this is really similar to the trend that we have seen in other places where Omicron's created a surge. South Africa, UK, Europe, it went up pretty quickly, and the drop's been pretty quick also. I do always want to point out that even at 679, it's still slightly above the highest that we saw before the Omicron surge. However, we like the trajectory. It is dropping pretty rapidly. And just like Penny said, I also am very grateful that this board stood up and did the right thing at the right time. What we have seen, the pattern in this pandemic is we have periods where we have surges, and we have shown that we are willing and ready to take enough consequential steps so that we can protect our residents. I would say that our vaccination, if you skip the next slide, but go to the CDC vaccination data, next one, I would point out that our vaccination rates are pretty good. Not only do we have the best in the region here, we are better than the national average and quite comparable with some of the best in the country, which is good. Since the Omicron surge in December and now, we did have quite a lot of people that were infected also. And we know that there are some measure of natural immunity there also. So, we do have additional tools for us now in managing this infection, this pandemic, that it does allow us to do other things to reduce the risk. And finally, I promised Penny I was going to be very brief, is that there are ways to hold meetings in person in a way that is safe, that reduces the risk. And I'm sure that Penny, we've talked, will be presenting that to you, but there are ways to hold meetings in a way that are safe. Thank you.
Okay. Continue, County Manager.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Ariola. Next slide, please. I think they have to go back to the workforce update slides. Slide number 5. And this slide was inserted this morning. So if you looked at yesterday's, we've now updated it on our website. But this gives a picture from July until now. And I wanted to I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this slide and then more time on the next slide to give you the picture of the workforce. And then we'll open it up for discussion. So we got our report of our first employee positive case on March 24th, 2020. We had very few employee cases in the initial months. And we really started tracking regularly when this chart shows in mid-July of 2020. And some interesting data on our averages over this time, and you can see the trend line up through December. So from when we started tracking it all the way to December 24th, 21, we averaged 11 positives per week. From December 25th, 2021 to present, we've averaged 129 positives per week. So that shows you the impact and why we were so grateful that you took the steps that you did in January. The next slide gives more detail on the most recent phase. But since the start, our average in all weeks included is 21 positives per week. And since July, we've only had 2 weeks with no employee positives. And now to kind of zoom in on the last, since Christmas Eve to now, this highlights both the positive trend line, which is the orange line, and then the quarantine and isolation when you factor in that, and you can see the trend line there. So as I've illustrated, the surge really impacted us right after Christmas, the most recent surge. Our weekly total of employee positives was going into Christmas Eve was 22. And then we quickly jumped to 85 for the week ending December 31st. And you'll note the high week had 231 positives in 1 week, and there were 45 in 1 day at that period. In addition to positives, we also saw a substantial increase in those who were quarantined for exposure or symptoms, and those numbers peaked the week of January 21st, at which time we had 328 employees quarantined or in isolation. And so that just kind of gives you an overall picture and a few anecdotal things that helps illustrate the overall aggregated numbers here. In a 4-week period, from the Christmas week to the week ending January 21st, employees out due to COVID increased dramatically for 9 departments in particular. So it wasn't evenly across the organization. But in those top 9 departments that were impacted the most, that increase in positive range from a 425% to 3,400% increase in that period of time. And those departments included Sheriff, Parks and Recreation, Mental Health, Wastewater, Library, Developmental Supports, Facilities, Emergency Services, and Corrections. Not in the areas that you want that. So I will say that I'm very proud of staff and the board and all of us collectively to take measures so that we weren't shorting our community on service levels. And I'm quite proud that we've weathered that peak. And as you can see by the graph, we are starting to come down. And I don't know if I said what the latest numbers are, so let me find that. As of February 4th, which was Friday, the current number is 108 in quarantine and isolation in our workforce with 54 positives. And the numbers are still inching down since that on Friday as well. So the next slide. Continuity of government, I've mentioned several times, that's our ability to provide services to our community. And like I said, I'm extremely proud of our staff to be able to, with very few exceptions, provide the services and get through this. So staff is supportive. If you're ready to go back into the hearing room starting Thursday, the 10th, we urge you, however, if you do that, to continue the mitigation efforts that's helped us be so successful. And so the room layout that was in place right before you went virtual, we're recommending that we go back to that and continue to monitor and continue the adjustments as needed as the pandemic throws things our way to adjust to. And right now it's headed in a really good direction and we hope that continues. But in order to stay on that path, we have to keep the mitigation efforts going forward. For example, keeping the commissioners spread out on the dais, limiting the number that come into the rooms where you're interacting with others in person, such as the boardroom. And we would recommend going what you did before with 1 speaker in the room at a time. I will be supporting staff if they feel more comfortable to do their presentations remotely or virtually. And if obviously we continue to allow public comments virtually, if that's what people want to do, or there's an in-person option, and continuing to encourage masks and social distancing. And then we will also continue our workforce mitigation efforts. I know that's not the topic of discussion today, but we'll continue to review those as the numbers change as well. So with that, Chairman, really we are ready. That's the extent of my presentation on the overall workforce numbers, and I'll stand for questions and see if you all are ready to take action.
Okay. Well, I would simply make this suggestion that based upon the data that's been presented, that we do go back to the hybrid in person, and that we encourage those who wish to do the public comment period virtually. If they want to come in person, that is fine. They will come into the room one at a time like previously. And layout of the room will remain as was, with distancing between commissioners as well as staff, and very limited seating in the commission chambers. And so with that, Ms. O'Hara, you have a question?
Yes, I just wanted to know, is it the board's, is it a board decision on the layout of the boardroom? Whose decision is that? Is that the county manager's, or is that the board? Will that be changed with a board vote?
Well, that was the same process we had in place before we went virtual. So the recommendation is that we go back to that same protocol.
Right, I realize that, but just from a procedural basis, when we're ready to get back to normal, will that be a board action, or is this a county manager's decision?
It'll either be a board action or a consultation with the board.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Hansley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had a question for Dr. Ariola. Yes, we're all glad to see those incidence and positivity rates coming down. Asking you to look into your crystal ball, but your well-informed crystal ball of based on what other countries and other areas of the country have seen. Do you expect that will continue to go down? Would that be following what we've seen elsewhere? Or what are the chances that we could have an uptick in what we're seeing, and when might that happen?
Thank you, Commissioner Hanslick. And one thing that responding to this pandemic has taught us is there are so many variables and things do change. There are places like Denmark and UK, for example, where there was a secondary surge, largely driven by the subvariant, the BA2 lineage. But those weren't as bad or as dramatic as the initial surge by the BA1 Omicron lineage. It is also true that the level of, there are other variables, level of vaccination. Denmark, for example, has much higher levels of vaccination than we do as a country. And so there are variables there. What's clear though is we got to where we are, at least in part, because we took enough consequential steps to change the trajectory. So what happens in the future is a function of if we continue to do those things. Getting more people vaccinated is absolutely important. Having a lot of people wear masks and physical distancing and other mitigation steps, all those continue to be important. Strictly in terms of having meetings, there are ways to have meetings safely. In terms of what happened in the future, our best case scenario is this goes down to where we were in October when I presented to you, and incidence rate was 88 per 100,000 residents, and positivity rate was below 5%. That's a dream case, but we have seen cases in other places where we have secondary surges that are driven by the BA2 lineage.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Allenbrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I really appreciate all the comments and everything the county manager and her staff has worked together to pull this together, along with Dr. Oriella. And I think we're all ready to go back in safe environments for the staff. So I have a motion ready that would terminate to go back to in-person with the recommendations of the staff in the safe environment.
Did you make that as a motion?
Can I make the motion now?
That's fine.
Thank you, Chair. I move to terminate resolution number 002-22 effective 2/10/2022, and that all public meetings of Johnson County Board of County Commissioners and county agencies, commissions, and boards be conducted in person.
Okay, do I hear a second to that motion?
I second it.
All right, Ms. O'Hara seconded the motion. Discussion. Mr. Ashcraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to clarify, because Mr. Chairman, I thought I heard you say, and the county manager say, there would be some consideration for individuals, both staff and public, who wanted to interact with us virtually. Is that included in this motion?
That is correct. That is correct.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Commissioner Fast.
Yes, I guess this is the question, you know, for Penny. One of the incentives we had for vaccination was, or I guess not incentive, but to keep the county operating, keeping it safe. We had weekly testing. I mean, now it's been a year since many of our staff have gotten vaccinated. How are we encouraging our staff to get boosted? Because pretty soon that increases the risk when it's now been over a year since vaccination for many of our staff. What sort of plan are we going to implement with boosting?
Yeah, thank you for making that point, because getting boosted does help. And we encourage our staff, just like we encourage the community. Right now, we do have attestation that you can voluntarily do as an employee for all of your vaccines, including boosting. But right now, we don't have any set plan in place that does give any extra, I guess, incentive at this point. I will look to if either Dr. Ariola, Joe Waters, or Tiff want to respond to that, because they have been key advisors to me as we make changes with our workforce, getting input from all the directors and working with those departments that have specific challenges. We do certain things there. For example, those departments I listed, one comes to mind is JCDS, where we look at different strategies for areas that there's particular high turnover where we're getting close to impacting services. But I'll look to Dr. Ariola, Joe Waters, or Tiff if they want to add anything to that question.
Well, I would simply add this: we continue to recommend that vaccines, boosters, and so there are no requirements, but those are strong recommendations, and I think we continue in that vein.
And Chairman Tiff did have her hand up.
Yep. I'm sorry?
Tiff Pinchel did have her hand up, and Joe Waters may be looking to say something too, but I know he's... Tiff, did you have things to add to my response?
Dr. Ariola or Joe Waters, anything to add?
And
yes, and Tiffany as well, but this is Joe. I'll jump in first. Maybe Tiffany can follow me. We do track, we ask our employees to enter their boosters also into our Oracle system, as I recall. That is where we keep track of the basic vaccinations rates that we report on to you all occasionally on our 71% vaccination rate.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Myers, you have a comment?
Chairman, I'm sorry. Tiffany Henschel, I think, was trying to respond to help. I apologize for stepping in now, but I think she was trying to say something, and I don't know if you heard me say that.
Stephanie, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just going to indicate, as Penny spoke to earlier, we will be changing the quarantine and isolation guidelines as we move forward, and those will contemplate boosted status. And so those who are exposed and boosted may continue to work. And if you're not boosted, you will need to quarantine for 5 days. So there will be some incentive, Commissioner Fast, moving forward for boosted. And we are at a little over 600, I think somewhere around 650 who have reported at this point their boosted status.
Okay, all right, thank you. Commissioner Myers.
Thank you, Chair. I would just caution that, again, a lot of data changes as we've all seen throughout this pandemic. Some of the data that's coming in is really starting to give a lot of people in the scientific world some better estimations as far as boosters and things of that nature are concerned. And so, again, I think this is one of those situations where we don't want to act too quickly, but again, be provided with the data and see what changes are occurring, and then taking that information and making wise decisions based on that.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner O'Hara.
Yes, well, thank you. I just want the rest of the board to know that school districts and the cities are in person and have been. So we're kind of following the crowd to get back to normal. But as far as these extraordinary requirements that we're making to the staff and the discriminating between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated, and it sounds like now that we're going to have different rules for those who are boosted and those who are not. And I believe that this rises to the level of a policy decision, and I would just really encourage staff to come and get approval from the Board of County Commissioners so that we can have a vigorous debate as to whether we are going to have these requirements or not. So that's just my comment. Thank you.
I think these requirements, if I'm correct, follow the CDC guidelines, and we have been doing that for some time. So, Commissioner Hanslick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to follow up on Commissioner Meyer's comments. I think that it is really important that we are flexible, and that as we get more information and as data changes, that we recognize that going forward, we may have to be nimble and willing to do what's necessary in response to what's going on. I think other communities, other governmental organizations make choices that are best for them, and we need to make choices that are best for the 4,000 county employees under our authority. And so I'm pleased that we have been able and willing to make those kinds of flexible choices to keep everyone as safe as possible.
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other questions or comments? If not, will the clerk please call the roll on the motion?
Commissioner Fast.
Aye.
Commissioner Myers.
Myers, aye.
Commissioner O'Hara.
Yes.
Commissioner Hanslick.
Hanslick, aye.
Commissioner Ashcraft.
Yes.
Commissioner Allenbrand.
Ellenbrand, aye.
And Chairman Eilert.
Eilert, aye. I have 7 votes in favor, so the motion carried. There are no other items to come before us, so we are adjourned. Thank you all very much, and we will see you Thursday. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.